Thank you for joining us again and welcome back to our channel. If you are joining for the first time, we always appreciate your time. Today, I want to look at the reason why the United States of America continue to push African countries to accept immigrants coming from different countries, from Latin American nations. We've seen how the United States of America had pressured the country of South Sudan to accept deportees that are not South Sudanese national. And then this continue across the board. The relationship between the United States of America and African nations has come under scrutiny in a whole lot of areas. We've seen the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which is on life support, and it's done. It's not going to be renewed anymore. And we've looked at countries like South Africa, Egypt, who have come under tremendous pressure with regards to this current administration that has led these nations in the continent of Africa to be on the back footing. And we've seen the most embarrassing meeting that African nations, a few of them, selected to arrive at the White House to talk about trade. But it wasn't all about trade. The recent embarrassing and disgraceful meeting that the Ukrainian leader had in the White House did not go unnoticed. And more importantly, South African leader, Mr. Ramaphosa, stood his grounds at the United States of America. If you look at the relationship, it's always questions. Each time African leaders will meet with the United States of administration at the moment, there is always a huge question in regards to geostrategic relationship, natural resources, partnering in a number of areas. As we've seen, the Russians and the Chinese are currently engaged the countries across the region like never before seen. The AES nations, like Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger, have decided to go it alone and to look for alternatives, as the regional organization ECOWAS is crumbling at the moment, which is being funded by its international partners. Let's go back to why I'm talking about making this video in the first place. The situation in regards to deportees that are coming from the United States being forced onto countries in the region is embarrassing and shameful. But first, let's take a look at the reason why. The recent meetings where the United States of America leader, Mr. Donald Trump, invited a few countries from West Africa, which was a classic, I would say, divide and rule method that we are seeing in the current geopolitical climate, is what the countries across the region have rejected. But I have a couple of videos to play here. But first, I want us to look at this particular meeting, because it wasn't only about talking about the collaboration, working together, looking for new business. It goes a long way, as according to CGTN Africa, who said that the leader of the United States of America, Mr. Donald Trump, continued to pressure countries, even those leaders who appeared at the White House, to accept some immigrants and deportees coming from a whole lot of countries which are not their nationals. But I think some African leaders push back. Let's play this clip.
Met U.S. President Donald Trump at the White House this week. The meeting was intended to discuss potential economic investments. But according to officials familiar with the discussions, Trump also presented the plan for African countries to take in migrants deported by the U.S. Guinea-Bissau President Umaro Sissoco Embalo confirmed that while Trump raised the issue, no formal request was made. He, however, said his country will only take back its own citizens if deported from the U.S., adding that taking in other citizens will violate the country's own policies. Nigeria, though not present at the meeting, has also firmly rejected taking in migrants. Nigerian Foreign Minister said the U.S. was pressuring African countries to accept Venezuelan deportees, some straight out of prison. Minister Yusuf Tugar said the country could not accommodate such deportees due to its own problems. Since returning to office,
now this is where the problem is, because if you continue to force African countries to basically take migrants or deportees, people who are not from these countries, you don't understand what the resources are in these nations, because a number of these countries across the region are struggling. And especially in the case of South Sudan, South Sudan said the capacity of their prisons was built for 500 people. But now, as you can see, the South Sudan government is saying that there are over 2,000 people in their prisons. And if the United States cannot deal with its national, I'm not saying that you don't have to take care of nationals. There are nationals coming from these six countries that went to the United States, including South Sudan, for example. They should receive their own citizen. But pressuring them to take nationals from countries which is not theirs, I think that is questionable. Let's listen further.
Since returning to office, Trump has been pressing to speed up deportations, including by sending migrants to third countries when there are problems or delays over sending them to their home nations. He has already made arrangements with nations in Central America. In February, the US sent more than 100 migrants from a variety of nations to Panama, and in March, approximately 200 Venezuelans were sent to El Salvador, despite a US federal judge granting a temporary suspension of the expulsions order. The Wall Street Journal has also reported that the US is seeking similar agreements with Libya, Rwanda, Benin, Eswatini, Moldova, Mongolia, and Kosovo. Human rights groups have been condemning the Trump-era policy as a breach of asylum laws and international norms. Sophia Shimechero, CGTN.
And that's not the way it's supposed to work. It's not supposed to work that way because this is gross violation, as the journalist pointed out. And are other countries around the world being forced to receive nationals that don't belong to their own countries? What kind of policy, what kind of geostrategic relationship is this in this particular manner? So Donald Trump is a transactional leader, and if you see Trump moving very closely to something, know that there is something behind. Everyone thought this meeting was going to be on trade, moving from aid to trade and supporting African countries. But the truth is coming out now. They are forcing African nations to accept immigrants that are not from their own countries. And this is really shameful and devastating in terms of the relationship. And it goes more further to look at the reason why African countries must come to realize that the United States of America is not as a strategic partner as it once was. They have to pick their battles carefully, work with the United States of America using a long leash, because the US is at this time thinking about its own interest. There is nothing wrong for countries to think about their own interest. However, if you are going against the international law, looking at a country like South Sudan that is struggling with its economy, of course, Mauritania, Senegal, Gabon, and the other countries that were there, they didn't kind of accept it. Of course, I know that based on analysts' own report, they're going to be pushing back on this. I think this is going to strain the relationship. On the surface, you talk about trade, collaboration, partnership, but behind the scene, you are putting things in there. I wonder why just countries of West Africa were selected to come to this meeting. It is shameful and devastating in the United States of America's foreign policy, which is based on hidden agenda, where we talk openly about coordination, trade, and support and investment, and African countries foolishly bring natural resources issues on the table, and then under the table you're shuffling that you need to take migrants coming forward. There's going to be some kind of quick pro quo here. That's what I'm saying, because if in that case, like a country like Senegal that spoke about that some United States of American company that helped Senegal to discover oil and they are looking for investment, it might come to a point where they want to force some of these countries, you take the immigrants, and then some of our companies can invest in your country. This is geopolitics at the lowest level, as we all have seen. It is amazing why African countries should be put at this tough spot. I think they themselves taking themselves to basically go to the US administration without standing their grounds. This is where the problem is. I think that from the geostrategic point of view, African leaders and those who went to the United States of America should make it clear where they stand on the issues. If you do not let the United States, in this case, the leader of the United States, Mr. Donald Trump, to know where you stand, he's going to continue to manipulate and also continue to drive his own particular American first, which is okay. Every country has to put themselves first. But it's left for these countries across the region to stand up their grounds and remind the United States of America that it is not business as usual, that we do all have interest as well, that everyone else is thinking about their own self. and their nations, their citizens. So by going to the United States of America and just sitting there and comfortably listening to what Mr. Trump was talking about, we listened to your journey, your interesting approach, talking about Nobel Prize and an awful lot of other things. And in African countries, don't stick out their point and made it clear in front of him that we're not going to accept this particular thing. Of course, Mauritania said that we're not going to accept this. Of course, they are open to taking nationals that come from their own country, but taking people from Colombia, Mexico, and all those other nations, why don't you send them there? So this is dual interaction at a worst level, and the United States of America is violating a lot of international laws in regards to this particular situation, and why the continent of African nations should go back to the drawing board, build their own system, arrange their countries, and enable or make sure that their citizens travel less. Again, I'm not saying that you're going to stop people from seeing the world, traveling around, but if you are, to an extent, forcing these countries to accept people from nation that is not theirs, then this is not bilateral collaboration. This is not partnership. It goes a long way to remind African nations why the United States of America might not be as strategic. Has the U.S. asked European countries that immigrants will be deported to their own nations? Have it asked Asian countries? Why only African nations in this case? I think it's the African nation who are foolishly taking themselves to the United States and sitting there and accepting every nonsense that they're being told by the U.S. administration. And I think that more importantly, it's not up to the presidents that went to the United States to accept this. It must go to their parliaments, and the parliaments of these countries across the region must decide on who comes to their nations or who does not. It's very simple. It's not like refusing somebody from traveling. No, it's about the parliament who decide, not the presidents decide who comes to their countries or not. I want to thank you for watching. Let me know in the comment section what you think regards to the reason why the United States of America will feel comfortable, okay, to force African nations to accept immigrants who are not from their own countries. For now, I'll be looking forward to meeting you soon in our next episode. Have a good day. Bye-bye.